This is a Grade 3 Mission 5 overview for Zearn Math. If you're using Eureka materials, it's the Module 5 overview. The title is Fractions as Numbers. The central focus is on understanding fractions as numbers that represent equal parts of a whole. Students coming in from second grade will have exposure to fractions. Halves, thirds, and fourths, I believe, is how far they go. And they would be related to equal parts of different shapes. The progression for this mission is it starts by partitioning fraction strips into equal parts, moves into a focus on unit fractions with a numerator of 1, which is what a unit fraction is, and keys in on the fact that that's the basic building block to form all other fractions. Talks about fraction form, introduces students to fraction form, uses area models to visualize and compare fractions with same size whole, and transitions from parts of a whole to points on a number line. And this is where it starts to get kind of tricky, but it's a nice transition and a good transfer activity to see if they can apply the skills they've learned here to a different format. They'll partition a number line into different fractional units. For instance, they'll take between 0 and 1, they'll put 2 hash marks and divide it up into 1/3, 2/3, 3/3. And they'll compare fractions on a number line and find equivalent fractions using a number line. The prerequisite skills for this mission are fluency practice, either or. The spiral fluency that'll help them understanding is to review halves, thirds, and fourths from second grade. So maybe go back to second grade materials. That may all already be in your materials. But a quick review of that using the models from second grade would be a good prerequisite skill. And then you should be drilling multiplication facts hardcore by now, all of them 0 through 10. The core fluency, things that will be introduced in this mission that are of most importance, are fractions with denominators of 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 8. These are the highest level that it goes to on your standards. You don't need to cover anything beyond that. Your curriculum will go beyond that at times. Just know that's a little beyond standard, and that maybe if it goes beyond or doesn't cover these numbers with these denominators, those might be lessons that you can cut out if you're running out of time. And of course, core fluency is to practice counting fractions using unit fractions. For instance, 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, 4/4, so they would actually count those. And this would be a great time to bring in the number line to count those 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, 4/4, just to show that incremental aspect of the fractions. The foundational goal is understanding what a unit fraction is and how it builds all other fractions. I think this is important. And to focus on fractions with the denominators 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 8. Nothing beyond that is necessary at this point. What doesn't go away, now we're getting into skills that they've covered in prior grades, prior missions that are seemingly unrelated to this mission. But nothing in math is really unrelated. Continue to throw them some addition and subtraction problems from time to time. Check their automaticity with facts to 20. Again, these are things that if they're left to sit in long-term memory and they're not stirred from time to time, they'll start to deteriorate. So we're just stirring those a little bit. Automaticity with multiplication facts 1 to 10. This is your standard, so actually 0 to 10. This is a third grade standard, so you should be drilling this a lot. And unit fractions and part-whole relationships are things you need to continue to revisit from this point forward, although they're not as important as the prior three. Developing an understanding of fractions is important as well, though. Special notes, so if you're running short on time or if you have struggling learners and you need really tips on where to spend your time focusing, these notes might be helpful. One thing I note here is in the curriculum they use number bonds, and they seem to use them quite a lot. These are really good graphic organizers, nothing wrong with them. They're used a lot in the Eureka Zearn curriculum, but number bonds are just that. They're an organizer. They are not a skill. They are not an operator. They need to go away. For students to become fluent, they should get to a point where they don't need number bonds. So you're not teaching number bonds to long-term memory retention. They're just a tool, really, to use. Another special note here is fractions on the number line. Beyond 1 is above your standard. There are some lessons that go beyond 1. I think it's perfectly fine to expose kids to this. You're going to have kids who can take it and run with it. But for your strugglers, you do not need to go beyond 1. And if you're running out of time, your standard goes to 1. So any tested items should occur between 0 and 1 when you're looking at fractions on a number line. So just something to note as a potential time saver. And here's one. Reasoning about distance using fractions on a number line is a hard concept to grasp. It's hard for me and you as well. So especially using a fraction to compare to, gauging kind of the approximate distance, this is really difficult. So I would expose kids to that, but I wouldn't spend a lot of time. In fact, it could be one of those strategies that's so complex, it could be damaging to struggling learners. And if you've got a learner on the cusp of understanding unit fractions, they're to the point where they really understand divisioning, using the number line divisions on a fraction, using fractions, working between 0 and 1, and then you bring in these difficult concepts of trying to reason about fractions on a number line, you could actually kill the learning that happened prior. So I'd be really careful with that. And that actually can happen. So be really careful with this. Really, this is a very complex skill with a really high cognitive lift. And in the end, it's not something that's essential and enduring. When students need to reason about fractions or essentially compare fractions, they're going to create equivalent fractions to do that. So I would spend more time, if you've gotten there, working on fraction equivalency.